Do you want to draw detailed and contoured boulders and rocks like this? I'm going to show you how. Hey everybody, I'm going to start off with some advanced boulders and share the important techniques. Then I'm going to simplify it and draw a few smaller rocks. Now let's get rocking. So drawing rocks is all about how the light plays off the different facets or sides of your rock. So one simple way to think about it is if you just have a simple 3D shape like this box with the sunlight coming from this direction, that would make this side of the box have the darkest shadows and this side be a little less dark, and then the top we'll just say is our highlights and we'll just leave completely white. This is a good way to start thinking about how to approach drawing a rock, because it really is about creating the contrast in the shadows and highlights to create all those different rock faces. I'm just going to draw a general boulder shape, and then we're going to create all those different facets out of it. I just have a 2B pencil here. Now if you're just starting out drawing rocks and boulders, a reference image can be quite handy to get an idea on how to form all of the different rock faces. But today I'm just going to draw one freeform. Now let's further define this boulder by defining where our shadows will mostly be based. So I'm just going to lightly shade this in for now, and we will adjust this as we go. My range of pencils today to create all the shadows are going to be from a 4H up to a 4B. But the main thing when you're drawing your rock is to just have a wide variety of contrast in your shadows in whatever range you are most comfortable with working in. So I have a 4B pencil now, and relating our rock here to our 3D box with the light coming from that direction, this is going to be some of the darker areas, and then it's going to sort of curve around here to where this is our lighter shadows for the most part. So where all these little areas are jutting out from our white highlighted area of the rock, think of those as areas that are creating darker shadows. Think of that as like a little nook in the rock where light can't really get down into. So these areas that sort of bulge out, those are going to get a little bit more light, making it a little less shaded. Of course, down by the ground as the rock sort of tucks under itself, that's going to be dark again. Now it's important to really have a wide variety in your shadows, because that contrast is what's going to shape all the different faces in your rock and make your rock more believable. And the good thing about rocks is you can kind of add as many facets as you want. So I'm just going to add a little one in here. Let's just say there's a slight divot in here causing a little bit of shadow. We're having this play as if it's actually further back around. I'm going to take just a little eraser, dab this off. Another way to make your rocks feel really believable are these little sort of indicator lines, just super small, that show the change in direction of the different faces. So I'm just going to put kind of like there's little cracks just sort of spilling down this top face of the rock here, creating this other face. And then here we'll have this look as if it's almost in like a real deep crack. Of course down here again by the ground, tucking under itself and going to be in dark shadows. But all these tiny directions of your lines are super important, no matter how small or subtle, because that's showing the different directions of your rock faces. And most rocks just aren't perfectly flat, you know. So we'll have this almost as if it curves out and it's starting to get a little light. We want to make sure we get that wide range in shadows. Creating all sorts of different faces is really important. And always keeping in mind how the light is playing a role. So I'm going to kind of create some more visual interest here. Break up this rock a little bit. We're going to make it seem like this rock sort of bends. So again with our light source, this would be slightly in shadow. So I got a 4H pencil here. We're just going to lightly shade this in. Again, so we want the spillage, all these little indicator lines spilling down. Again, we have another one of those little nooks right here. This is going to be dark as, again, it's tucking inside the rock itself. And with this, we want to create this contrast here to make it really believable that there's several different rock faces connecting here with all these different contoured lines. Again, down by the ground, it's going to be nice and dark. So we have this contoured line coming down, and then as this tucks back in, this is dark again, which will again then slowly move into the light over here. Maybe there's a little blip that comes in here that's actually getting more light. We're just creating all these different rock faces in relation to our light source. I'm going to adjust this front section a little bit. We're going to have it just sort of spill over just a little bit, and then we'll shade that in. And remember, this is closest to our sun here, so we're going to keep this pretty light. Now you can see with that spilling over, it just makes it a little more visually interesting. Of course, down by the ground here, we're still going to keep this dark. And we'll add this little contoured line just to sort of fill this in as if the rock bends in a little bit. So again, where all these little indentations in the rock are, kind of play with the facets in those areas. And there are going to be a bunch of them. I'm going to have this almost feel like it's a different part, just to create a little more dimension on the top. So while we in general are getting lighter up in this section of the rock, think of this little area right here as the box where this is the top. This rock face is equivalent to this part of the box in our example. So this should actually be darker again. Maybe not quite as dark as the bottom of the rock. This is looking a little too smooth, so let's give it a little more visual interest. If you want to add a little more light, just use your eraser. So with the sides and shadows kind of worked in, let's give the top of our rock some more visual interest. I'm going to change the shape just to give it a little bit more of an interesting look. All these little directional lines like this are really important. They tell the direction and give your rock some really nice shape. Now that we have things working for the most part, I'm going to go back and adjust some of these layers on the side. I'm going to add little details like little directional lines. Just really subtle, don't overdo it. Work these shadows a bit more. Make sure these rock faces are all believable. Don't be afraid to use your eraser. I'm actually hardening some of these shadows a little bit because, you know, a rock is a solid object. Now as things are starting to look good here, add some visual interest on the top of the rock with different pock marks and cracks. Pock marks and cracks are, you know, essentially little divots in the rock, and those are little shadows being cast. My one bit of advice here is in these highlight areas, you want to be really subtle with them. So you can see on this side of the rock, things are quite a bit darker up in here, especially at the bottom, of course, where it's tucking under. And then as we move this way, it's a lot lighter. And then of course on top, where the rock is mostly getting sunlight, it starts to really brighten up. So I think that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to draw another rock behind this, keeping all of those same elements in mind. The only note I want to make on this rock is to be sure to fill in little hidden shadows like this one here on the back side. It's a small detail, but it adds some really nice dimension. And then when it comes to small rocks, just simplify everything down on a smaller scale, drawing in fewer rock faces and contour lines, and things should really come together pretty quickly. Now to finish off these rocks, I'm just going to add a little bit of a ground layer here. Now if your rocks don't feel quite right to you, giving them context like this can really make them come to life. And so that just about wraps it up for rocks and boulders. My best advice if you're new to drawing rocks and boulders is just to experiment and play around with creating all these rock faces in regards to how they would interact with the light. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.